This we know, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. This we know, all things are connected like the blood which unites one family. All things are connected. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning, campers.
Good morning.
This time of year reminds me of camps I have known, especially here at St. Luke's, Camp Neighborhood. When I wrote this, I wasn't aware that my little podcast was coming out talking more about Camp Neighborhood, but here we go again. What a wonderful experience for everyone involved. I think there's even a photo of one year's group in the treasurer's office. Camp Neighborhood followed an earlier summer youth program in this area. Our camp was organized and shared by youth and counselors from both St. Luke's and Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. An effort to bring people from different parts of Knoxville together. An opportunity for young and older to get to know neighbors who in some ways were different. Camp Neighborhood. I know I've mentioned it before, and it seems timely in view of our gospel today and in light of our broken world these days. The July 4th issue of the New Yorker magazine had what I found to be an incredible, understated, yet accurate illustration of our life in parts of the United States. These days of choosing sides, blue, red, black, white, rich, poor, and many other ways of saying and being who we are. On the cover, which I'll put out in the entrance, maybe some of you have seen it, is of two row houses. And I know it's too small to see, but I'll tell you a little bit. On this side, we have flowers growing and a sign that talks about pollinators and Black Lives Matter, and a woman in a hammock drinking wine with screens in her windows. And over here we have a man with his can of beer and Back the Blue sign and freedom, enjoy your freedom, thank a veteran. And his doorway is sealed up, he has a camera, and the lights are on inside the house. So this says a lot. Someday I'd like to do a group where we each took one house and pretended to live in it and see what that was like. Choosing sides. A beautiful day in the neighborhood, I'm not sure. Who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? The lawyer in the gospel asks Jesus. Last week, as I drove into my driveway, I saw my next door neighbor following me on foot down the drive. Let me insert that although my neighbor, David, has lived next door to us for over 4 years, we have had perhaps 4 brief conversations. He lives alone. I know he is recently retired from the military, and he has a lot of tattoos and a motorcycle. Can I say stereotype? Yes, I can. I had Dave pegged, my neighbor. He was rushing over to tell me he would be out of town for a week and would I keep an eye on his house. Sure, I said. Then he said he and his son were driving to Denver to unite with his cousins who had just escaped from Ukraine. I got quiet. Then he went on to ask, why can't people just love each other and stop killing and fighting? Goodbye, stereotype. goodbye negative expectations. Who is my neighbor? A story. A friend of mine was just out of law school one day, and he was headed off to court dressed in a conservative white shirt, gray pants, and tie. And he was stopped by an elderly woman. She said, "Are you one of those Latter-day Saints boys on a mission?" "No, ma'am," he said, "I'm an attorney." She said, "Oh, you're playing for the other team." Well, enough of this lawyer criticism. The lawyer in the story of the Good Samaritan was indeed playing for the other team. He was testing Jesus. Never a good plan. And this familiar story always has more to teach us. Two teachers helped me to see some added dimensions to this well-known, yet often misunderstood and misinterpreted story. In his book, Unexpected News, Robert McAfee Brown writes that if the neighbor in this story and in all of our definitions of neighbor, we think of someone who comes to us for help or anyone we can meet along the way, then there is no need for change in the world. It can remain basically the same. Such a view of neighborliness does not call us to move beyond our accustomed routines. It is only those along our way whom we need to view as neighbors. Jesus' exchange with the lawyer. In response to the lawyer's abstract question, Jesus tells a story, after which he returns a question to the lawyer. But it is an entirely different question. Which of these three, he asks, do you think proved neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? The lawyer's question was abstract. Jesus' question is specific and action-oriented. So in terms of Jesus' question, it is not the person by the side of the road who defines neighborliness for us, but the Good Samaritan who enacts it. The neighbor is the Samaritan rather than the one in need. It wasn't the wounded man. Instead, it's the one who serves. That's the neighbor. Now, I'm still wrestling with this because it gets a little fuzzy in my brain, but I'm working on it. The one who serves, that's the neighbor. And I started thinking about making the word neighbor a verb, since we can mess around with words these days. To neighbor. And the story is concerned not just about anyone, but a person who had suffered injustice and violence and needed help from someone who was able to have compassion on him, the one who showed him mercy. Amy Jill Levine, in her book, Short Stories by Jesus, says, for the lawyer and for Luke's readers, the Samaritan does what God does. The divine is manifested only through our actions. Therefore, Jesus responds to the lawyer's observation, not with a question and not with a parable, but with the imperative, go and you do likewise. To speak of loving God and loving neighbor does not require theological knowledge. It does not ask for a particular location of worship. It does not speak to a particular book. Loving God and loving neighbor cannot exist in the abstract. They need to be enacted. She says, we do not know what the lawyer did following this parable. All we can know is what we, upon hearing the parable, will do. She adds, can we finally agree that it is better to acknowledge the humanity and the potential to do good in the enemy? Will we be able to care for our enemies who are also our neighbors? Will we be able to bind up their wounds rather than blow up their cities? And can we imagine that they might do the same for us? Amen.
Amen.